So far, so good. I think Putin is way out on the ice. It's just for the first time becoming increasingly likely, not probable yet, that he may not be able to come back from this. He's miscalculated. It turns out the will to fight is much more important than the capability to fight. He thought he was going to invade Ukraine, and it was going to be similar to his earlier incursions in Ukraine and in Georgia. He didn't realize the sanctions that he would receive. He thought those would be slaps on the wrist. So he's increasingly isolated. The sanctions are working better, and I hope that he will remain a pariah for the rest of his life.
He's certainly going to remain a pariah. There's no question about that. But do you think that this could take him down? And if so, what's to stop him from burning the house down around him as he goes down?
I think if Putin miscalculates further, for example, if he were to order a chemical weapons attack, some in the Russian military may say, listen, we weren't even on board with this idea from the get-go, and we certainly don't want to take it to this level. That's one scenario. A second scenario is some of the old KGB clique that he used to run around with down in St. Petersburg. They could decide, you know what, the boss isn't all there anymore. We may need to move on to a different type of situation.
You know, in terms of miscalculation, Andrei Yermak, who is basically the chief of staff for Vladimir Zelensky, is hunkered in a bunker along with his president. And he wrote an op-ed in the New York Times in which he said, quote, "Listen to what Mr. Putin is saying. For years, the West listened to Mr. Putin but didn't hear him. It's just now waking up to the existential challenge he poses to the world order." Was Putin ignored for too long? I mean, if you go back to June of 2001, the first time an American president met with him, George Bush, he said, "I looked into his eyes, I found him trustworthy, I got a sense of his soul."
I think over time people did underestimate Vladimir Putin. I think people always knew he was cold and calculating and aggressive, but I'm not sure the world really got on board with the idea that he would just brazenly invade another country, use thermobaric weapons, otherwise kill hundreds, maybe thousands of civilians. This, I think, was a shock to many. I don't think it was a shock to us here in the United States, but it certainly shocked Europe, and I'm glad that Europe is stepping up, and it's now time for us to continue to get a continuous flow of arms into Ukraine so that we might be able to stop Russia there so that they don't threaten NATO.
There are reports that the end game for Vladimir Putin is to take over the country, break the back of the army, and reinstall Viktor Yanukovych as the president of Ukraine. He was the one who was ousted back in 2014. Tom Friedman, writing in the New York Times, says this: Putin doesn't have the ability to install a puppet leader in Ukraine and just leave him there. A puppet would face a permanent insurrection. So Russia needs to permanently station tens of thousands of troops in Ukraine to control it. You know, Ukrainians did kick out leaders that they didn't like twice, 2004 and then Yanukovych in 2014. If Putin tried to put a puppet regime in there, obviously they're going to rebel against it. And would he need to leave tens of thousands of troops in?
Putin has gotten a lot more than he bargained for. That might have been his plan at the get-go, but he's used too few troops for the objectives that he's tried to achieve. And if he thinks he's going to install a puppet regime and that the Ukrainians over time are just going to learn to accept it, there's no way. They're all going to rebel. We're in a totally different situation about what Putin could expect a reasonable endgame to be.